Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Toffee Blues podcast with me, Callum Snell. Delighted to say Kieran, YouTuber, content creator, has jumped on the podcast with us this week. Kieran, how you doing, mate? You're all good?
I'm doing well. It's a pleasure to finally be on here. We've been trying to work around trying to get me on, and I've been excited for it, but finally here. So thank you very much for having me.
No, made us to have you on. Obviously, a lot to talk about. It's been a while since we've done one of these podcasts on the back of a defeat, so you've picked the right time to come on. But yeah, we've got to talk about it. We've done well this far, not to have to dwell on defeat too much, but of course, Everton did. We're on the end of a really disappointing loss to the hands of United on Sunday night in a game where, I think it's fair to say was the fair result. There's an argument maybe we could have nicked it at the end, but I think all in all, we didn't do enough to merit some kind of result out of that game. So before we jump into the nitty gritty of it, what was your take on the game, Kieran?
I'll tell you what, first 10 minutes, I thought this is it. We're up for it now. We were giving 100%. We were going for every ball. We were chasing every 50-50. We were doing everything we could. Scored the goal. I mean, even Conor Cody's reaction in the celebration showed how much we were worried against Man United. And then as soon as we scored the goal, we just sat off them, allowed them. And we just pressed in poor areas. We allowed them to pass round us easily. And I mean, it even led to their goal from Gana Gay, who's normally a composed midfielder. You'd rely him in a tight situation to just be able to display the ball. But I don't know what was going on. I don't know what was going on inside his head. I don't know if they were just doubting whatever we were going to do. But to get caught on the ball in that area against a team like Manchester United that could easily beat us on the counter, yeah, it wasn't the best. But it's a loss. It was a poor performance, but you can't really judge us from that. You've got to move on from here. It's second loss at season. Just got to take it on chin, and hopefully all our players keep their heads after this.
Yeah, I think that's the frustration, Kieran, is that you mentioned there how we went 1-0 up, and it was the perfect start, wasn't it? It was the perfect start. We thought, wow, we couldn't have started any better. It was a fantastic goal from Alex Iwobi, fully deserved. A lot of fans been crying out for him to get his name on the score sheet, and it was a fantastic goal. And from that point, you think, you know what, these are there for the taking. Manchester United, of course, I'm not going to do them too much of a disservice because I think there's a lot of talk about Man United. There's a lot of bands that are associated with them or whatever. But at the end of the day, if we're being real, come on, they've got some very good players who can hurt us. Mm-hmm. So for us to go a goal up, it was fantastic. And for that particular Man United side of this moment in time, we could have quite easily just, I think we shell-shocked them a little bit, didn't we? So it was quite frustrating and strange how we just retreated and sat back and almost like just admitted, I know we ended up defeat, but not admitting defeat, but we just sort of like curled up, and then that was it, really, wasn't it? That was really frustrating to see. And then you mentioned there a lot of some individual errors, and it was just a shame, really, that we couldn't build on the first goal, and it took the last 5 minutes or so for us to really maybe push for that equaliser, but we just didn't take the game to Manchester United, which was a real shame. Just team-wise, obviously Anthony Gordon came back in for Dwight McNeil, who got the winner against Southampton the week before. A bit harsh for you, or were you expecting to see Anthony come back on the side?
I think it was inevitable that Anthony Gordon was going to get his place back in squad. I've always liked Dwight McNeil. I think he's always been a great player. He might not have the stats, but whenever he's played for Burnley, he's put in great performances. But for Anthony Gordon, you can't really drop him. He's a young player. He is one of the main reasons that we stayed up last season, and he's an incredible player. You can't drop him. Dwight McNeil I don't know if he's low on confidence or he's just not fit into the system correctly yet and just needs a little bit more time. I mean, you can't ignore the goal by Dwight McNeil. Unbelievable goal, great positioning. And I thought it was great against Southampton, but Anthony Gordon, you can't exactly drop him for a one great performance by Dwight McNeil. But I just hope Dwight McNeil gets his performances up because, like I said, I like him as a player. I think he'd be great in our attacking play, but for now, I don't think anything's getting really in front of Anthony Gordon.
Yeah, you sound like a very big fan of Anthony Gordon there. You seem to talk very highly of him. For me personally, I think he's been a little bit underwhelming this season, being totally honest. I feel like earlier on the season, especially those away games, against Leeds, Brentford, he looked really, really positive. It seemed like the transfer talk had maybe done him the world of good in a way, and he was using that because sometimes players can it can be a good thing or a bad thing, and for a while it looked like it was a good thing for Anthony Gordon. He was putting in some good performances. He was getting his name on on the goals, something which, again, similar to Iwobi, we've been crying out for. But it just seems that Goodison, for me, he's just not tailed off it a little bit, but he's just not really offering as much as fans would expect. And I fully appreciate there's bags of ability there and there's so much potential there as well. But do you sort of see the argument that maybe Anthony Gordon, for some people, has dropped off a little bit? Because we know last season we commended him for his work rate, for his dying for the badge, or all this sort of stuff that Evertonians love to see. But I think there has been moments quite recently in this last few weeks or so where he has maybe dropped off a cliff a little bit. What would you say to
that? I had this conversation the other day, and I think there's just many components to that. There could be just the fact that is a team better around him, so he doesn't shine as brightly as he did last season, because there were no effort last season. So him giving 100%, you'd see that straight away. But this season, you've got players giving 100% everywhere in the pitch. So I don't know if it's that. I'm not sticking up for Anthony Gordon. Yes, he's not had the greatest performances. He's in battles that you think he'd win, or in games that you think he'd shine a bit more. He shies away from it a little bit. I think he'll pick up. I just think it's getting used to the system, getting used to the team, because last year we had to deal with a 5 at the back. We had to deal with whatever players we've got. Now we've got the players in midfields. Now we've got players to actually change the team. I mean, Manchester United game, for example, we changed to a 4-4-2, which pretty much no one expected, but we did that. So whether Lampard goes with that and we change to that, it's just, I think it's a team around Gordon that makes Gordon look, I won't say bad, but just not as great as last season. But I think he'll pick up. I'm a massive fan of Gordon. I love exactly how he is with the club. He is what we would be on the pitch, so it's nice to see that. But I think he'll pick up. I don't think it'll be a awful season by Gordon. And plus, I don't know if it is, but the Chelsea situation could be on his mind. The big money that we're getting put out in the media, whether that's on his mind or not, we can't really say. But I back him to turn it around this season.
Yeah, he's still very young as well, isn't it? I think it's easy to forget his age, and a lot has been asked of him in the last 12 to 18 months, hasn't it? Last season, I think that's a great point you made, how it wasn't exactly hard to stand out in that side last season. And if we're being honest, I think a lot of pressure has been put on Gordon. We're relying on him an awful lot. He's one of those, for a player so young and for such inexperience, if you like, in the Premier League. He's only really been, last season was his real breakthrough season. So, for a lot to be asked of him, for him to maintain levels for where he is at in his career, I think he can be forgiven for tailing off. But, I will say that I'd be lying if I said I wasn't disappointed with his input in the last few games. But again, we're not exactly blessed with options in those areas either, are we? So there's not exactly a player who we can bring on. Andros Townsend's still out, and you then look at Damari Gray as well as an option, Dwight McNeil, of course, and you look at those options, and none of them are hardly world beaters. So for Anthony Gordon, I think the fans take to him, so it's hard for him to not be included as much. So hopefully, fingers crossed, Anthony Gordon can improve, because there is a player there. I'm not completely in the camp of sell him to Chelsea. 60 minutes should have took them money. No, I think it was in the summer a little bit, but I think. Yeah. What do you think about that then? About the price tag? You briefly touched upon it there, but do you think how much of the whole Chelsea move thing do you think is playing on his mind at the moment, if any?
I'm unsure about this, because I mean, you'd think there's some sort of loyalty in there, but then you've had previous experiences with Ross Barkley, who thought he'd stay at the club no matter the price tag getting thrown about. Even Wayne Rooney early on. I know it was a completely different situation with Wayne Rooney, but there could be so much going on Anthony Gordon's mind with a deal, whether he wants to go play Champions League football, or whether it's just a load of stuff made up by the media, or if it's just not bothering, but people are just egging it on. I mean, I'd like to think that Gordon's not bothered. He's just going to play for the club and stick his way out. But like I said, loyalty in football nowadays, very rare to come by.
Yeah, absolutely. That's it, isn't it? But hopefully Anthony Gordon can pick up some of that form that we saw last season. And at the start of this season as well, let's not forget, it wasn't so long ago we was putting in some great performances and slotting in some important goals for us. So fingers crossed he can take the game to the next level. Of course, we'll come on to the Spurs game shortly, but he's not available this weekend, of course, because he's picked up too many yellow cards and he's suspended. Just finally on the United game, Dominic Calvert-Lewin's back in the squad. Would you like to see him come on a little bit earlier? I've seen a few say that, given Martinez's height for Man United, it could have been a game that Calvert-Lewin could have really benefited from and made an impact in. I don't think he was ever going to start the game. But would you like to see him maybe come on a little bit earlier, maybe at half time or something like that, or can you agree with Lampard playing it safe with him?
I'd agree with Lampard. Just because you wouldn't want to risk, personally for me, I wouldn't want to risk throwing DCL in at half time just to pick up another knock or risk it even further. We're in a game that we weren't doing great. We weren't really getting back into the game, but we weren't conceding. We weren't making silly mistakes. So to try and keep the same system, try and change it from there, I probably would have done that. Probably would have changed a couple other players instead of DCL. DCL would have been my main priority.
Yeah.
But I couldn't understand why some fans said we should have got him on, because as soon as DCL come on, the game changed completely, whether that was DCL coming on or just changing the 4-4-2 system. But for me, I wouldn't have risked it. DCL's a key player for us. Even if we've got Neil Maupay now, DCL is still a massive player for us. He's how I see Lampard's system really thriving this season. So I wouldn't really want to risk it, especially this early on coming back from injury. But hopefully in the Tottenham game, hopefully either 90 minutes or 45, I'm hoping to see him back.
Yeah, I think you're right there about not risking him. The point you made, because last season there was a big thing about him being brought back too early by Rafa Benitez, and a lot of people were really frustrated at that, and probably associated that with why he struggled so much for the remainder of that season, because he brought back too early. So, to give Lampard a bit of slack, the benefit of the doubt or whatever, I think maybe there is a bit of that in his thinking as well. He doesn't want to rush him back too early, and because he's an important player for us. Again, we're not exactly blessed with options in that area of the pitch either. So, we've got to be very careful with him. And of course, we saw the introduction of James Garner as well. We took our time to see him make his Everton debut, but he was brought on for the final stages against his former club. And I thought he looked very bright, very positive, Kieran. So, yeah, it's something to look forward to. And I think now that the debut's out the way, I think we could maybe start to see a lot more of James Garner. What do you think?
It was really nice to see him on the pitch. I've always been a fan of him. Watching him at Nottingham Forest last season, I thought he had an incredible season. Even though he played in like a sixth role, the deep line playmaker, he was still creating chances left, right, centre, and that's what we needed last season. I've always been all for. I've always said, no, we should be starting Garner. He's got the experience. And then the start of the season to now, I was 100% backing that. But since Garner had the poor start to Manchester United, I don't know what was going on. But then for Garner to come on and get his former club for his debut for Everton and just I thought it was sensational. The passes he were playing, composure on the ball. I mean, to nearly score an equaliser in some fashion as well, that'd have been amazing for the lad. But I'm hoping to see more of him. I think we should play him and at least test him out more and more. Garner's on the later end of I won't say later end of his career. We are old footballers getting to now. But as a young player, and I think he'll fit great in the system.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of Manchester United fans, Nottingham Forest fans, as you touched on there, they all seem to be very full of praise for him as well. So I think that's something to really hang on to going forward. He's definitely a player with a lot of potential. He's always involved with the England under-21 setup as well. And yet he's very young. So for going forward, if his cameo against United is anything to go by, he can be a really useful player for us. Just before we park the talk about the United game, what do you think? I've seen a lot of two different reactions to this. Was it an overreaction or was it a reality check? What do you reckon? Okay. Let me maybe word that better. Not an overreaction as such, but do you think we can't get too bogged down in it because we were unbeaten in 7 games and we've obviously improved this season. So maybe not an overreaction, but do you think it was a bit of a reality check or just one of them?
I think we'd be stupid to throw all faith and all hope at winning at this moment in time. I mean, like I've just said, we've lost 2 this season so far. We are drastically improving. This United game last season, that exact game could have been 4-5-0 if that were last season. You can already see the improvement of Lampard. Yeah, we've not got 3 points. It was a poor performance, but it's just one poor performance. I think even in the Chelsea game, the other loss that we got this season, I thought we still played incredibly well. This is the first poor full 90 minutes that we've had. Obviously disregarding the first 10 and the last 5.
Yeah.
But I think it would be stupid to throw everyone on the bus, throw everything out of the window. We've got to stick faith, got to keep our heads, same for the players. And just hopefully we can go on from here. It's a loss, but we move on. We've got Tottenham, got to think ahead. Can't really dwell on it that much, really, can we?
Yeah, it's one of them. I think it's always frustrating, isn't it, when you're leading in a game and some results went your way over the weekend as well, and you could have propelled yourself into a healthy position in the top half of the table. So it's always going to be frustrating, but we can't, I'm with you, we can't get too bogged down on that. We've been playing some good stuff this season so far. We can see that the changes are there. We've got much better personnel than we've been accustomed to over the last 12 months or so. So, Lampard knows what he's doing. The players know what he's doing. And there were some honest interviews coming out off the back of that game as well, which I think was encouraging. And it all comes back to, will we see a reaction now? Because this is the other interesting thing here, and isn't it? Like, we're going into this Tottenham game at the weekend now, and albeit, yes, it's another really tough game, but it seems to be like the first time this season that we've had to react in such a way. I know I think after the Aston Villa game that we lost as well, we started to go on this unbeaten run, but this is like the sort of, now that a few players have found their feet a little bit and players are up to speed, this is the first time this season where we're going to see this Everton side's character really put to the test, isn't it?
Yep. I think we've got the players for that as well. I mean, we've got leaders. I'm in backline, Tarkowski, Conor Cody, that's just speaking to. We've got the players this season to react, stay professional, and just keep our heads. Last season, we didn't really have those players. Once one player drops or one injury, we had all of our other players dropped. Like I said, the Conor Cody situation, the Man U game, told the players to keep their heads. Obviously, it backfired. But leadership like that will help us along the season. Losses, draws, we'll pick up from that. And I think we'll react against Tottenham.
Yeah, like I say, even a draw wouldn't be the worst result in the world. The draw would be a great result, actually, away to Tottenham. And we'll look at the Tottenham game in more detail shortly. But just more on some player news now. Obviously, Yerry Mina been in the news today. He was in the news earlier in the week as well. But let's start off by saying it's very difficult to see how Yerry will get into this defence at the moment anyway. We all know when he's fit, he's a great player for us. He's been at the club for a fair few years now. When he's performed and when he's fit, he's a great player. And, we've banged on and on so many times about his fitness. But to hear the news again today that potentially he suffered another injury setback, I think a lot of people would be quite happy to wash their hands of him now, unfortunately. I think, Kieran, what do you reckon?
It's frustrating because I think Yerry Mina has been incredible for us when he's played last season. Whenever he come in, had a couple of games, I thought he was incredible. The Chelsea game for last season in particular, great player. It is frustrating when you have a player as good as that, get as many injuries. But like you've said, I don't really see him getting into our back line. I mean, previous injury records for both our centre-halves have been little to none. I mean, they've barely missed any games. Now they're at Everton, you can't really say that. You can't really hope on that. But I just don't think Yerry Mina will ever get back into the back line unless the worst happens, an injury. But then it's still counting on Yerry Mina to stay fit, which we can't all rely on whatsoever.
Yeah, it's a shame, isn't it? Because if we did have the same kind of fitness record as the likes of Tarkowski and Cody, I'm sure that he would be an ever presence in that Everton backline. Because let's not forget, he was on a massive contract when he came in. I think it was in the summer of 2018. I think he came in. So he's one of the biggest earners at the club as well. So I think it's fair to say he's definitely in the twilight of his Everton career, linked with a move to Inter Milan. I think it's fair to say that he's not going to be around for much longer, is he? As you said, on his day, great player. He was quite pivotal, albeit last season it was in small patches, but you mentioned that Chelsea game there. He's a wind-up merchant as well. Had a great relationship with the likes of Alan, Richarlison, who, of course, are no longer at the club as well. So I think you wouldn't be wrong to say that Yerry Mina's days are numbered at this club. Would you agree?
Yeah. There's just no point having a player on that sort of contract that you can't really rely on to play in game in, game out. On his day, incredible, like you said, it really is, but we can't be keeping wages like that in a financial mess that we're in on a player that just there aren't more games than they play in a season. So yeah, I think it'd be a smart situation. I think we all could agree that it'd probably be the best situation if we do let him go. It'd be hard to see because of the player that it can be, but I think it's fair to say we should let him go.
Yeah, it just doesn't make sense, does it? We talk about the money he's on there, and for what he's given back, it's just very little at the moment. And it's a shame because he's a top centre half on his day, but we just can't justify paying those kind of wages. And there's no, I think he's out of contract at the end of the season anyway, as it is. So there's no way Everton are going to throw more money at him. I think that ship sailed, and for Yerry Mina. And I think the club's just moved on as well, hasn't it, from Yerry in those sort of times? He came in, during a period of time when Marco Silva was the manager, he came in with the likes of Luka Dean, Bernard, Andre Gomez, Zuma. It was that season, wasn't it? And, none of those players are here as well. It's a different Everton team side now. And I think Lampard's not soft as yet. I think he's it would take some kind of monumental force to move out Cody and Tarkowski at the minute as it is. Elsewhere on the injury front, a bit more positive. Nathan Patterson and Ben Godfrey are back doing some individual work on the training field. That's going to be a massive boost, isn't it? Because I feel like we really missed Nathan Patterson in that Manchester United game. I think when we all know he's had a fantastic start to the season, but I think this was the first time when we really noticed his absence, wasn't it? Seamus Coleman, albeit he tries his best and he'll always be a fan's favourite, but he struggled catching the likes of Ronaldo, Martial, didn't he? Whereas I think Nathan Patterson, I'm not saying he would have changed the game, but his absence was definitely noticeable, wasn't it?
Nathan Patterson, it was a massive miss for Manchester United. I was just about to say it, to be fair. It was. I think the thing is with Nathan Patterson, I think that we all love, and especially why I love him, is great all round, defensively and offensively. And we missed that because Coleman, he could do one of the two. He could defend really well, but then can't really get up the pitch, which is fair enough. It's an old player, and it probably shouldn't be in our starting 11 at this moment in time. I shouldn't say old, but it probably shouldn't be in our starting 11 at this moment in time, especially in such an intense league. So yeah, Nathan Patterson were a miss massively. And I mean, just the likes of when Nathan Patterson played against Liverpool, and you know how much of a great influence that Luis Diaz has been for Liverpool, recent times, especially last season. So for Nathan Patterson to be able to defend like he did against him, and as much as I thought Coleman had a solid job on Rashford in the Manchester United game, offensively, I thought his passing was poor, so we really didn't miss Nathan Patterson. And I just can't wait to get him back. I think I was gutted we didn't see too much of him last season, but to see him at the start of the season thriving and playing incredibly well and unfortunately getting an injury, I'm so excited to have him back in the team.
Yeah, 100%. I was quite surprised actually when I checked Twitter today and saw he was back doing some form of training. I thought
he'd be out for so much.
Yeah, exactly.
So longer.
When we saw him go down the Nations League in the manner that he did, I think a lot of people were bracing themselves for the worst. And then obviously he came back now, and the news was that he's only, I think at the time it was 5 to 6 weeks, something like that. So for him to be now back on the training field already doing some work, that's fantastic. And then he can't come back into that side quick enough, can he? Offensively, defensively, the pace, it's just, God love him, but it's just a level up from Coleman, isn't it?
Yeah. It's hard to say because Coleman's been a great servant for us when we've needed him. But for Nathan Patterson, it's a bit of fresh air. We've been demanding for a new right back for how many seasons now, and to get him in the form he's been in from the start of the season to obviously when he got the injury, he's going to be massive for us this season. Another young player that's going to be bright for us in the future, especially under Lampard's. Yeah, I think he's everything we've ever wanted. So it's just nice to have him, and I think we're all just excited to get him back.
Yeah, 100%. He can't come back into the side quick enough. So, back doing some individual work. I think, the 2 or 3 weeks maybe, we can start thinking about getting him back in the side, and that would be a massive boost. Also, Ben Godfrey as well, who suffered a really, really sort of harsh injury at the start of the season at Chelsea.
That really shocked me to see him back, yeah.
Yeah, again, that was a bit of a dodgy injury. To see him back doing some work again is a big boost. We mentioned earlier in the podcast, didn't we, talking about Yerry Mina, about these defensive options. It's difficult to see how someone's going to come in and take one of the centre-half roles away from Cody or Tarkowski. But Ben Godfrey, that's a solid option to have. I remember his first season when he came in, he was phenomenal for us, wasn't he, under Ancelotti? So he'll be chomping at the bit to get back on the side as well, won't he? Because he's got something to prove. Because he started that Chelsea game, didn't he? So he'll be desperate to get back on the side because, again, he's a real athletic player, isn't he? He's got so much pace. I think that's the one thing that maybe Cody and Tarkowski maybe lack. Fantastic players. We could sit here all night and talk about how great they are, but pace-wise, Ben Godfrey's probably your man, isn't he?
I think Godfrey, that I love about him so much and why I think is vital to the back line, is proven that he's useful throughout the back line. So if we need him to play left back to cover for Michaelenko, he's done that before.
Yeah.
Even the right side of the pitch, he's done that before. And like you've mentioned, yes, Tarkowski and Connor Cody, brilliant players, great in the air, great physically. Ben Godfrey just adds that another level of pace for, I mean, even in a situation against Manchester United, when you've got Rashford getting in behind the line, you've got once you face teams like Manchester City, when you're going to have all their attack coming towards you, is great for that. But yeah, I'm really shocked to see him come back this early with how bad that injury were. But it really frustrated me, that injury, because it could have been prevented so easily, and it is down to the official's fault. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah, went out.
That injury really frustrated me.
Yeah, I remember that the ball went out first game of the season, and it was I think did he overstretch or something, or did he fall back on himself trying to keep the ball?
I think he went over his ankle.
Yeah, he went over, didn't he, when it went out of play? So that was obviously very unfortunate. But to see him back's a big boost as well. We talk about defensive options. Michael Keane, again, God love him, doesn't exactly fill me with a load of confidence. We know he's got a mistake in him, but again, he can be quite good on his day. You got Mason Holgate there. Yerry Mina, I think for many people is just a write-off now. I'm sorry to say, but it is the situation we face.
Oh, yeah.
But Ben Godfrey, I think a lot of people are desperate to sort of see him recapture that form he showed in that first season. It's sort of difficult now to see any sort of centre half have some kind of route back into that centre back role. But as you mentioned there, Kieran, you forget how versatile Ben Godfrey actually is. He can play full back as well. And it's his pace and his athleticism that maybe sets him apart from Cody and Tarkowski. So it'll be interesting to see how he gets integrated back into the side. So really good news there with Nathan Patterson and Ben Godfrey edging a little bit closer to match fitness. Okay, just finally, before we wrap things up, we've got to look ahead to the Tottenham game. We spoke earlier about a reaction. How confident are you about picking up some kind of result here? You mentioned earlier in the podcast, Kieran, about characters. There's been times in this past where we haven't maybe got reactions from Everton sides because we simply just don't have the personnel to have any kind of reaction. But we're hoping that this time around it can be different, aren't we?
It's going to be difficult, especially Tottenham's probably not the best team to have to try and get a reaction out of, especially the form they're in. So I'll be excited. It is a real test, and I'll be excited for how we turn it around and how we actually take to the test this time. I think the things that happened against United, we needed that. We needed to learn from that, to learn not to get scared when we go 1-0 down, to stay strong. And it will help us for the rest of the season. So with Tottenham game, whether I'm confident we'll get any points out of this, I'm unsure of. But I think we'll react. It'll be a better performance, I can guarantee that. I just hope we can stick it out for the full 90 and just don't drop or have what we've been doing for a couple games this season where we've been doing well for the first 15, 20 minutes, dropping off and then picking it back up for the last 15. I just hope we can stick it through for the full 90 at least. And just put a good performance in all round.
Yeah, well, it can't get any worse than last season's trip there, can it? When we got bounced everywhere 5-0. What was an awful night for Everton. I think Lampard's learned an awful lot since then. I think we played such a high line that night, didn't we, last year? And we just got torn to pieces. So it'll be interesting to see what he does with this game, because obviously coming back and off the back of the Man United game, really disappointing results. We know that there's leaders in this team. We know that there's players and characters who will want to put it right and make us, get back on the horse a little bit. So what do you see him doing team-wise? Can you see anyone getting dropped? Idrissa Gana Gueye, a couple of question marks over his place in the side. He was at fault for the Southampton goal 2 weeks ago, and he was awful against United last week, wasn't he? So is he in danger of getting dropped, or do you think maybe you're playing a bit of a risky game there, trying to change it too much, knowing that we have got some positive results with the current side as it is? Or would you think James Garner's done enough to maybe warrant a start? What do you reckon?
I think he'll stick with Idrissa Gana Gueye. I think it'd be too harsh to drop him just because of that first 20 or 30 minutes of Manchester United game. I think it'd be harsh to drop him. I think the only change that we'll make for the Tottenham game with obviously McNeil probably McNeil coming in for Gordon as he's not able to play. I think that'll be the only change for the game. I think he'll stick with the same system. But I could see James Garner getting another appearance that game to change into the midfield. And I will be excited to see what we do with the formation, because obviously we changed to a 4-4-2 in the game against Manchester United, bringing two strikers up front. Whether we'll do that in the second half, whether DCL will actually start or come in the second half, we'll wait to see. But I think we'll stick with the same system that we had against Manchester United to start off with. Let's just hope we can stick with it for 45 at least. Yeah,
that's it, isn't it? Really difficult game going away to Tottenham. It is at the best of times. Tottenham have made quite a good start to the season as well. Richarlison obviously facing the club for the first time since his exit, so that'll be interesting to see how he fares there. I think I'm correct in saying he's yet to get a Premier League goal. I know we had one chalked off for offside, so hopefully that's not going to come against us. I know we got a couple in the Champions League, but I think he's just still awaiting that first Premier League goal. So I know we won there a couple of seasons ago during the COVID season. We won 1-0. Calvert-Lewin gave us that win there. We touched on that awful night there last season when we got bounced everywhere 5-0. But, you know, it's a new Everton side. A lot of the players who played that night don't play for Everton anymore or don't get a game for Everton anymore. So that tells you everything you need to know in itself. So, yeah, you know, Tottenham played last night. They looked a little bit leaky towards the end, you know, against Frankfurt. So it's going to be an interesting game to see how it plays out. You know, we're coming into that game trying to bounce back. Tottenham are trying to keep some kind of momentum to keep some pressure on those sides above them. So it'll be interesting. Of course, it'll be interesting. It's sort of the second of like this trilogy of really difficult games for Everton. Obviously, we've got Man United out the way. And then obviously we've got Newcastle on Wednesday night after this one. So got a few difficult games coming up, Kieran, haven't we? So, you know, looking ahead to the next two, I'm not totally sure if we will get another podcast out for the Newcastle game, but the next two games, are you confident that we can, how many points do you think we can take away from these next two games, which are very, very difficult ties away from home?
Well, obviously I'm going to hope for 6, but I think 4 would be incredible. I think a point away at Tottenham with the form that they're currently changing. I mean, you're getting the better end of the sun. It's not started off in great form, and I was completely turning himself around. So yeah. I'm scared to see how he performs. But I reckon 4 would be incredible. Point away and 3 points at Newcastle would be a great result. I think the form that they're in at this moment in time, how Eddie Howe's turned that team around is incredible. But 4, I think I'd be very happy with.
Yeah, I think the way we approach this game will be interesting as well. I think we might go back to that sort of smash and grab sort of style that we saw towards the start of the season, where we'd play very defensive, and that worked. You know, that really worked. Well, Cody and Tarkowski have had that sort of game plan plays up to their strengths a lot. So if we can play a counter-attacking football, you're always going to get a chance, aren't you? And, you know, if the likes of James Garner does come into the side, you get a corner, you know, he's renowned for his dead ball situations, isn't he? So there's definitely a lot of options, and you've got Calvert-Lewin there as well. So if he can come on and impact the game in some way, that'll be great too. But yeah, 2 really difficult games come up with the Blues. You know, we lost last weekend, which we never like to see, bringing our 7-game unbeaten run to an end, and it's not getting any easier with the trip to Tottenham before the trip to St James's Park on Wednesday night. So it's not going to get any easier, but if we can somehow get to the other side of this, and as you mentioned there, if we get 4 points, that'd be absolutely amazing. If we get 6, that'd just be incredible. But you know, we'll see how we get on, because on the other side of that, you start looking towards some more favourable games then, which take us into the break for the World Cup. So we'll see how we get on. But yeah, we'll leave it there. So massive thanks to Kieran for coming on to the podcast. Big thanks to him for jumping on with us. And be sure to give him a follow on Twitter and subscribe to him on YouTube if you haven't done so already. Of course, with the Toffee Blues, give us a subscribe if you haven't done so already. Give us a like, a comment. This podcast will be available wherever you get your normal podcast from. And yeah, keep on supporting. And yeah, take care, everyone. All the best. Thanks for listening.